My dear friend, have you ever been so good at something that you decide to handicap yourself just to make the game more fun and to give your opponent some extra chance? Have you done that? In the game I'm about to show you, Arjun Erigaisi is playing with the black pieces. He's completely dominating the Olympiad. He's 9 out of 10 in very good form. And guess what? He decides to handicap himself. After e4, he plays the move d5. This move doesn't have a good reputation at the top level. This is known as the center counter or the Scandinavian defense, by the way. Doesn't have a good reputation at the top level because it is considered that white gets a good position out of the opening. And white indeed gets a good position out of the opening. But despite that, Arjun is able to turn around the game. How does he do that? Let's find out. So after d5, white takes e into d5, which is correct, queen into d5, and goes knight c3, attacking the queen. This is usually the major problem in Scandinavian. The queen always gets attacked. Okay, and that's why you shouldn't be developing your queen early in the opening. Queen d6 played by Arjun. Now there comes the move d4. White is already controlling the center and he has one piece developed, whereas all of black's pieces are sleeping. Now black decides to bring his knight into the game and white plays the move knight f3. Now here, once again, Arjun has a chance to play a move like c6 or a6. And this is still considered to be, the standard theory. But Arjun decides to play the move g6, which is again not very popular. And the problem with g6 is it allows white to play knight b5, attacking the queen. And now the queen once again has to run. So you see this queen kind of gets attacked in the Scandinavian opening all the time. Queen b6 is played. And now white goes a4. Now the next threat is to go a5, once again to attack the queen. Arjun now plays a6, asks this knight to run away. Now this knight goes back to a3. By the way, you can't go a5 here because, queen e6 check and you lose this knight. Okay, so you have to be a little careful. So after a6, the knight drops back. And now Arjun plays the move bishop e6. You may ask, why did he play bishop e6? Well, because after knight c4, so now this bishop will chop off the knight, and after you chop this off, the queen is no longer attacked, but white has gained 2 bishops and black has paid a very heavy price by getting rid of this light squared bishop. And this is a kind of a semi-open position, okay? There is a semi-open file for white here, there is a semi-open file for black here. Usually in these positions, the bishops are to be preferred. So this is already a slight advantage for white. And you can see here, even the engine agrees with it. So bishop into c4. Arjun plays bishop g7 now. And both sides short castle. And white goes c3. Now, whenever you have the 2 bishops, they generally like to, own more space on the board. So one idea here could be to play a move like a5. Attack this queen. If the queen goes to d6, now you can play rook e1. Put more pressure here. Let's say the opponent plays e6. Now you can play the move g3. And suddenly there is this bishop that is coming to f4 and just kind of getting all sorts of tempos by attacking the queen. But here in the position, white decides to play c3 instead. And this allows black time to play this move c5 and start to put pressure on white's position. Now white goes a5, hits the queen. The queen drops back to c7. And white takes d into c5, queen into c5 and puts the queen on d4. Now usually, whenever, let's say, there is like 2 players are playing, the lower rated player often has a tendency to offer queen trades. Because what happens once the queens get traded is that the game goes into an endgame. And if the game goes into an endgame, the chances of making a draw go up. Although that's not always the case. That's not a very good way to play chess, okay? Because it tells your opponent that you are kind of afraid of them and you don't mind making a draw. I saw the interview of Arjun after this game, and he said that after the move queen d4, he started to feel good about the position because he knows that his opponent is kind of trying to play for a draw. Now black plays the move rook c8. Very nice move, protecting the queen and at the same time attacking the bishop. Attack and defense in one move. Nice one. And white goes knight e5. Here is where I want to highlight a quote of Sun Tzu, where he says, "The opportunity of defeating the enemy is provided by the enemy himself." Knight e5 is that opportunity. White has made a mistake in the position, and now black is the one who's going to get an advantage, a small advantage, and he's slowly going to build on that. After knight e5, he first plays the move e6. There was a threat of bishop f7. He blunts it with the move e6. Now, if let's say white plays queen to c5, there is the move rook to c5. This knight is attacked, and if the knight moves, this bishop is hanging. So you see, suddenly white is kind of feeling the pressure in the position. So after e6, white plays rook to a4, protecting this bishop. And this allows Arjun to take on d4, c into d4, and make this an isolated pawn. This pawn has no buddies on the e file or the c file. So if it ever gets under trouble, it cannot be defended by the e or c pawns. Now Arjun plays knight c6, challenges this knight's authority in the center. White takes, Arjun takes, and white plays the move bishop to g5, kind of putting some pressure on this d5 knight. Arjun plays rook d8, very nice move, putting pressure on this d pawn. Rook d1 played, and now he goes rook d7, very nice move, getting out of this pin. King f1 is played, and now there is a very interesting knight maneuver that happens. Black goes knight d5, and after king e2, he goes h6, kicks away the bishop, and drops his knight to e7. With the maneuver knight d5 and knight e7, Arjun has opened the diagonal for this bishop to put pressure on the pawn. Okay, next move, this knight can go to f5 and put even more pressure on d4. So very nice idea there. White goes bishop to d3, stops this knight from jumping to f5. But now Arjun doubles with the c rook on the d file and puts more pressure on this pawn. White plays rook d2, Arjun goes f5. Very nice move. The idea of this will soon be clear to you. Bishop c4 is played, putting the bishop on this nice diagonal. Now Arjun plays the move g5. Another nice move, and the point is to go f4 and trap this bishop. That's why, this expansion on the king side. So white has to stop that, and white plays f4 himself. This allows him to gain even more space with the move g4. White goes rook b4. White is, trying to create some counterplay here. Now Arjun plays the move knight to d5. The weakest square in the position is the square in front of the isolated pawn. And this is a very, very good example of that. Black just places his knight on the most weakest square. Bishop into d5. Of course, you don't take e into d5 and close the files for this rook. So you take rook into d5. Rook b6 is played, and now Arjun plays king f7, simply guarding the f7 pawn. Rook d3 played. Arjun plays the move rook e7. The idea of this move is so that the rook stays protected by the king, and now there is a threat of playing rook into a5. White decides to go for active counterplay. He goes rook b3, and now there is a threat on this b7 pawn. But now what happens is Arjun ends up winning the pawn after bd4, rook d4. Yes, white gains the pawn back, but Arjun first gives a check here, forces the king to move, and takes this pawn on f4. Now, many players would get worried that after rook e7, king e7, this position could end in a draw because, this is a rook endgame. And often I see that players under a certain rating level are afraid to go into rook endgames. One of the main factors in a rook endgame is the quality of the pawns. In this position, Arjun's pawns, if you see here, they are very close to the queening square. Okay, so already they can create a lot of counterplay if these two pawns get, swiped off the board. And that's exactly what ends up happening. There comes rook b7 check, king f6, white goes here b4, and now Arjun goes rook f2. Yes, these pawns are kind of marching forward, but white's pawns are just too slow. Rook b6, Arjun takes this pawn, and now there are 4 pawns here. So if at any point of time these 2 pawns get traded for 2 pawns here, white is still going to, be in a losing position because he's simply down material. Rook a8 played, and now Arjun makes a very nice move. He goes rook a2. I really like this move. The point of this is to keep this rook behind the most advanced pawn of white. Okay, and there is a reason why why you should keep the rook behind the most advanced pawn. As we go along in the game, you will find out. Rook a2 played, b5. Now Arjun plays b3. He is also, going to make his queen very soon. a6 played. By the way, notice that if you go something like rook g8, you're losing this pawn. And as I said previously, if these 2 pawns are lost, then black always has these 2 pawns to help him win the game. So after g3, white plays a6, getting this pawn as closer as possible to the queening square. Arjun goes h5, pushing his own pawns. King e3 comes. The king is somehow trying to come and help in the defense. h4, this pawn goes forward. And now if you see, the problem for white here is anytime he pushes the pawn b6, there is the move g2. This pawn is soon going to become a queen. So if let's say white decides to stop it, then white is losing this pawn. And if let's say white plays this, then you're in time to stop this b pawn from queening. You make a queen, by the way, it doesn't work because takes, and this would become a queen. At the same time, if you play here a7, once again the problem is same, g2. There is a queen that is happening. If you go to save it here, then this pawn is being lost. Positioning the rook on the a2 square kind of stops both these pawns from advancing further. Okay, very subtle, very nice point, very nice idea. h4, rook g8 played now. Now Arjun goes h3, and yes, he loses this pawn. But what he does in the process is that he gets his pawn closer to the queening square. White tries to stop the pawn from queening, but now the position is already lost. Because now there comes the move rook a3 check. If the king moves back, you lose this rook. Once you lose the rook, there is going to be a queen, and the queen and rook can very quickly checkmate such a exposed king. In the game, however, we must applaud White's sportsmanship, because instead of just resigning in this position, which is what 99% of the players would do, he allowed Arjun to finish the game and to do a checkmate on the board. And this is always considered to be a nice gesture when your opponent allows you to show the checkmate on the board. King f4 played, and now Arjun checkmates in one move. Can you find it? Let me know in the comments what the move is. And with this victory, Arjun is just one victory away from crossing 2800 ELO. Thank you very much for watching.